Andor was one of, if not the biggest surprise hits of the year, as it was a total departure from the usual Star Wars formula and gave us this much grittier version of the galaxy far, far away. In fact, the show is so different that people are having a hard time believing it's a part of the franchise. In today's video, we're gonna talk about what makes Andor great and more, so keep watching. First up, Andor is a breath of fresh air. Despite being a prequel series that leads to Rogue One, Andor is such a departure from everything we've seen in the Star Wars universe lately that it's almost hard to believe it belongs in the same franchise. Sure, Rogue One wasn't exactly adhering to the space opera adventure tropes either, but at least it still had the running theme in it. Andor, on the other hand, completely breaks free from any sort of shackles that bind the Star Wars universe together. And while that may not seem very promising on paper, this bold and risky approach actually ends up paying off really well. It's fresh, it's thrilling, and it's extremely well paced. So much that it absolutely destroys any other 6-episode Star Wars series. So perhaps Lucasfilm needs to take a look at this 3-episode arc approach for its other shows as well. Not to mention, the show has been such a hit that it's been grabbed by Screen Junkies' attention, who went ahead and made one of the best honest trailers we've seen. Now, if you don't know, they're a YouTube channel known for turning popular media into an honest trailer to give an actual idea of what you can expect. Oh, and usually they're hilarious as they make fun of everything that's wrong with the show. In the case of Andor, however, they're just blown away. So much so that they can't believe it's a Star Wars show. What's more, they even dubbed it as the best series in the franchise yet. Yeah, that's some high praise. Up next, Andor doesn't go for nostalgia bait. Now, one of the biggest criticisms of this new Disney-era Star Wars content has been its tendency to rely on legacy characters and things. Seriously, just look at any show that has come out over the past few years. Even something like The Mandalorian, which, at its surface, felt disconnected from the Skywalker trilogy, managed to somehow bring Luke Skywalker into the mix. Sure, we all love seeing these characters return and give us that sweet dose of nostalgia. At the same time, though, the trope sorta starts getting old when you keep doing it over and over again. Like, the moments start to lose their magic since everyone's expecting these characters to show up anyway. Not to mention, there's a ton of fatigue within the Star Wars community about the lack of originality as well. We mean, even the sequel trilogy kinda started off by fully copying A New Hope. Andor, however, subverts those expectations and gives us a glimpse into the Star Wars universe from a different perspective. There are no bacta tanks or lightsabers here. In fact, the series didn't even care to dive into the whole Jedi and Sith battle. Instead, it's all about the resistance against the Empire brewing across different parts of the galaxy. Not to mention, Andor's dark tone doesn't fit within the universe. Honestly, it is pretty surprising that such a dark and gritty story could take place within the same universe. Stormtroopers, for instance, are known to miss their shots in the movies and other media. And even if someone important does get hit, they usually get away with some minor injuries. But in Andor, things are much more serious. For starters, a single shot means you're a goner, and the show doesn't even dance around any gunfights. It's literally just one blaster shot and someone drops dead right away. Plus, to make it extra dark, they even focus on the person's face and keep the camera on for an extended period of time just to make you feel uncomfortable. The point is that Andor portrays what it's really like to live under the oppressive rule of the Empire, especially if you haven't gotten any fancy force tricks or powers. And that means introducing normal characters that are not only super relatable, but also are just normal people doing their daily jobs and living their lives. Oh, and that's a big part of this series too. You know, just focusing on the little day-to-day stuff of everyone on these planets. After all, the show sets its arcs up perfectly, so when you do see this day-to-day life being ripped to shreds by the Empire, it's all the more impactful. Besides, it's easily one of the best-written Star Wars shows ever, as every single dialogue manages to land, not to mention some absolutely stellar monologues throughout the first season. Let's look at the best references to the greater Star Wars universe, starting with number 10, the Steel Pecker. Now, even though Andor deliberately goes out of its way to not include too much nostalgia bait, it's still set in the Star Wars universe. And that, of course, means we've got tons of hidden references and nods in the show. The Steel Pecker, for instance, is one of the more obscure characters within the franchise, as its only main appearance was in The Force Awakens. It's one of the weirder ones though, as it literally eats metal and scrap on Jakku. So it was a surprise to see it appear during one of the scenes in Andor as well. Up next at number 9, stuffed bantha. Speaking of iconic Star Wars creatures, you really can't go wrong with a good old bantha appearance. After all, these Tatooine creatures have sort of turned into a meme thanks to Boba Fett. And guess what? Yep, the Beast of Burden appears in Andor as well. Now, sadly, we don't see Cassian riding around on one or anything like that. Instead, we actually see a stuffed version of the animal in our protagonist's childhood room. So if you were wondering about Andor's opinion on banthas, there you go. Now for number 8, all the name drops. Alright, we're gonna cheat here for a sec and just list a bunch of things that are referenced just by their name during the show. Oh, and there's a lot of them. Emperor Palpatine obviously is mentioned multiple times during ISB meetings, but the more fascinating name drops are about locations like Alderaan and Jakku. Not to mention, we also get a throwaway line about the planet of Kafrene, which of course is the place where Andor's story begins in Rogue One. Coming up at number 7, Wobani. In one of the earlier episodes of the show, Bix's boyfriend Tim Carlo asks the heroes if they're gonna bid on the Wobani run. But while the conversation ends up leading nowhere, the planet of Wobani does hold massive significance in Andor's story because, well, that's where he goes to rescue Jyn Erso. So in a way, you could say that this was the invisible hand of destiny at work, as Cassian, despite not knowing his future, is still being pulled toward Erso by sheer fate. Moving on to number 6, the Separatist insignia. During one of the childhood flashbacks shot for Cassian, we see him and the other children walking up to the downed ship on Kenari. And in this, we find out that the ship and its crew belong to the Separatists, as they've all got the insignia on their uniforms. But ironically, Andor's whole character stems from the fact that his father was against the militarization of the Republic. So while Cassian sees the Separatist crew members shoot one of the kids in his tribe, he later ends up joining them as they turn into resistance against the Empire instead. Following up at number 5, the Kyber crystals. Of course, these aren't new to the Star Wars universe in any way. In fact, they're perhaps one of the most important things in the franchise next to the Force, as they can power weapons from a lightsaber all the way to the Death Star. The crystal Andor gets, however, it's nothing more than a prepayment from Luthen. But while it represents a price for him, it's priceless for Jyn Erso, who gets one from her father. And this again connects the two Rogue One characters in a super poetic way. Next up at number 4, the Battle of Kashyyyk. If you didn't already know, Kashyyyk is the planet of the Wookiees. Now, it plays an incredibly important part in the franchise because 1, that's Chewbacca's homeworld, and 2, rebel leaders like General Tarful also lead the resistance there. But even before that, the planet played an important role in the Clone Wars, as it was the site for the Battle of Kashyyyk. So when we see some Wookiee armor from the battle in Luthen's shop, it's a very satisfying moment for hardcore fans of the franchise. Now for number 3, the Battle of Mimban. Speaking of iconic battles within the Star Wars universe, we also get a name drop for the Battle of Mimban during episode 4, as Cassian confirms that he did take part in the fight. But while Andor wasn't exactly leading the front lines, there is another character who actually fought in the infantry and witnessed the horrors of war. Yep, we're talking about good old Han Solo, as back before his smuggler shenanigans, he was actually serving the Empire and fighting for them. Coming up at number 2, the T-16 Skyhopper. The shipyard scenes in Andor are full of references to old ships and trinkets that connected to the OG trilogy, but perhaps the most noticeable of the bunch is the T-16 Skyhopper ship. Now, if you didn't know, that's the exact same ship that Luke's talk about in the OG trilogy, saying he shot womp rats back home in 1. Not to mention, he even had a toy model of the ship, which of course was given to him by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Finally at number 1, the Death Star. Of course, this list would have been incomplete without mentioning this massive reveal at the end of Andor Season 1. The show does a great job of setting this moment up during the arc in Narkina 5, as that's where all the prisoners are assembling the screws that join the parts of the Death Star together. And again, it's poetic because not only does Cassian help with building the super weapon, but it's also the very thing that destroys him in the end. That's a wrap for this video. What's your favorite Star Wars reference in Andor? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.